Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler. This is First Coast Connect, and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, oaths for teachers and moral instructions for students as Florida continues its conservative educational shift. Jacksonville leaders approve emergency food funds to plug a fraying safety net. A near doubling of state executions, with Florida home to almost 40% of the country's total. The city's telehealth provider calls a council member's fraud claims entirely false. And a small-scale slaughterhouse pulls back plans for a Beach Boulevard facility. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times Union. Good morning, David.
Good morning, everybody.
Frank Powers, former assignment manager at News for Jax. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, and thanks to veterans on this Veterans Week.
Oh, very nice. Also joined by Robin Lum, former Jacksonville City Council member. Robin, thank you and welcome back.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Anthony Austin, anchor at First Coast News. Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning, Ann.
So nice to see you all today. I want to start off talking about the Department of Education announcement yesterday that it'll be the first state in the country to adopt the so-called Phoenix Declaration. This is a creation by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, which is the group, of course, behind the 2025 playbook for Republican leaders. And so this announcement was made yesterday, a unanimous adoption. David Bauerlein, how does this fit into sort of the overall picture in Florida and Florida's educational system?
Yeah, well, obviously the part about school choice is something that really has already been underway in Florida for a while in terms of this idea that the education funding should follow the child. So I don't think this changes that part of the equation in Florida, which every year that moves further and further in terms of how education policy is set in the state. Now, some of the others in terms of what teachers say or don't say or how they teach, I mean, I know that has come up before. I'm not sure. I was reading through the Phoenix Declaration. I think if I were a teacher, what does it exactly mean to be able to follow some of these prescriptions here? So I think that's, it's obviously going further, I think, in terms of sort of setting the stage at the state level for not only the curriculum, how the curriculum is presented, to what extent teachers can sort of follow themes or not follow themes. So I suppose that may be a change in terms of how that moves forward. I was reading through it. I mean, we can maybe get into some of the bullet points, but one of them was citizens should teach citizenship, civic virtues, and knowledge for self-government. I think that's something everybody would agree with.
Some are a little vaguer. I mean, so there's kind of this list of priorities, right? And it starts with parental choice, as you say, and transparency and accountability, which sounds terrific. The third one they list is truth and goodness, which sounded a little vague, but the description sort of says education grounded in objective truth, free from ideological fads, and oriented towards the pursuit of the good. Robin Lum, that seems like that might be a little open to interpretation. Pursuit of the good.
It is, but it could also be open to a number of interpretations that aren't necessarily binding on teachers. So pursuit of the good, that could invite some very healthy discussion in the classroom. So as far as objective truth is concerned, you're going to have a lot of debates as to what constitutes objective truth.
Sure.
But as opposed to moral relativism, yes, I would support that approach.
Other priorities: cultural transmission, character formation, and then kind of second to last on the list, Anthony, academic excellence, which seems like maybe a low placing for a set of priorities promulgated by the Department of Education. But this is something that, they've made clear. They believe that shaping the child might be more important than transmitting sort of specific knowledge or curriculum.
Right, and for that pillar for academic excellence, it says that schools should prioritize proven teaching methods and a content-rich curriculum rooted in foundational subjects or fads or, quote, experimental teaching methods. Now, a lot of critics of this, especially a lot of teachers who are against this and they're not fans of this oath, they say we already do that in the classroom. We already work with students. We work with parents to provide them the best education as possible. In fact, the Florida Education Association, they came out against this saying, quote, the board should focus on what students actually need, fully funded schools, solving the teacher and staff shortage, and making sure every child has access to a strong public school in their own neighborhood. And they say that should be the priority right now. They say they already do what this Phoenix Declaration already says. So why should they be forced to sign it?
Yeah. I think along those same lines, Frank, this loyalty oath that Senator Clay Yarborough is proposing, which basically would, require teachers, including, pre-K teachers, to sign or to swear an oath to the Constitution and, affirm their kind of belief in the system, also their qualifications to teach. There are some people that are, concerned that that is tracking with just more of a kind of obedience / conformity as opposed to, serving any true need in terms of what teachers should bring or what they should be obligated to do. But others say, well, if you've got nothing to object to, why not?
Well, on paper, the oath seems to endorse qualities and goals we should all aspire to, right? Be a civic responsibility, highest standards in your behavior and dealing with others, be a positive role model for kids. Those come from within. Those are qualities. You can't tell people you're going to be civically responsible. It's a mandate, but my question is, all right, let's have the oath. People are going to sign it because there's an implied threat of loss of state funding. Who's going to determine if the oath has been violated? Are we going to have oath police? Are there going to be what a violation is codified in this oath? And who decides where those violations have taken place and decides, can the violator challenge the accusations?
Or what happens? I mean, if you do violate the
Right.
oath, is that something that can be actionable against your teaching
Well,
license?
clearly that's the point. I mean, this
it would
is
be the implication.
that's the implication. We're going to have you sign an oath, which, by the way, sounds more like something a police officer or a soldier would take, or maybe Superman, truth, justice, and the American way.
Yeah. We have an email from MJ saying our school board, which is supposed to be operating as a nonpartisan body, has increasingly adopted conservative ideology-driven policies that are reshaping public education in Duval County. Public schools are meant to serve all children. When boards become partisan, it undermines trust, silences diverse voices, and puts students and educators in the crossfire of political battles that do nothing to improve academic outcomes. And then adds, parents need to be aware of what's happening and the community deserves transparency. Robin, I'll just ask for your last thought on this. I mean, is there something that that our educational system will gain if this oath becomes a requirement?
I don't see that there's a loss. And as far as the school board being partisan, being conservative isn't being partisan. There are different approaches to public to service in public office. So yes, this school board tends to skew more conservative, but that doesn't make them partisan. One thing I'd like to make, you're talking a point I'd like to make about the this notion about the teaching fads. We've been having large scale public education in this country for well over 100 years. You would think that by this time, pedagogy would have focused in on things that work. And in recent years, we've seen the social emotional teaching. We've gone through the Common Core controversy. I think that we are prone to pursuing these fads when we really should be concentrating on if we haven't figured out by now how learning takes place in the classroom, then we really have problems. So you can talk about funding issues all you want, but if we can't agree on how education should take place in the classroom, I think that's the great failure.
I'd venture to say a lot of teachers would say they know just fine what to do if the state would stop telling them how to run things.
And they might have a point. Yes, I agree.
Also, a message from Tom on Facebook saying anyone who thinks a loyalty oath is a good idea should read Joseph Heller's novel Catch-22. The book describes what is going on currently just as well as Project 2022. If you're just joining us, I'm talking to David Bauerlein, Anthony Austin, Frank Powers, and Robin Lum about the week's headlines. You can join our conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social. And, of course, you can watch all of these beautiful faces on our live stream. It's on the WJCT YouTube page and on Facebook. I want to move on now to some money that the city approved this week to help forestall community hunger. This is coming after the longest government shutdown in history. A vote, David, this is something that you covered, happened at City Council during their kind of Veterans Day delayed meeting on Wednesday, and really just hours before the House of Representatives ended the government shutdown. What were they aiming for here?
Well, I think it was short-term relief. They passed $200,000, which is also what St. Johns County did, $200,000, just to kind of help out as through this hump. It does look like the federal government reopening means that there's going to be a full restoration of SNAP benefits. Sometimes there's a delay getting that through the pipeline. There's another legislation for $2 million that got deferred, and that still may come up. It does show that it shows in some sense that what happens at the federal level has a ripple down effect to the local level. And if federal cuts happen, then there's going to be pressure on local lawmakers because they're closest to the people to find ways to make up the difference or try to make up the difference. It's very difficult for local government to make up what the federal government and state government are able to do. But in this case, $200,000, that would help a little bit. I mean, I think SNAP benefits amount to $30 million citywide. So you're not talking about a large amount of what the benefits programs are. The federal government reopens, so maybe that takes the pressure now off the local government to try and help to make up the difference and pick up that slack.
Anthony, this was something that David mentions, our lawmakers being close to the citizens who are experiencing this. And we heard some of those stories at the meeting. Ron Salem, who proposed this $200,000 version of the emergency funding, said that he had attended a food drive at Regency Square where 800 cars were pulled up. Ultimately, he said that people started lining up at 4:45 a.m. for the drive, and it didn't start until 10 in the morning.
Exactly. And Ann, I was about to say that, in my line of work, and especially being a consumer reporter and advocate for our channel, I see a lot of people who are constantly in need. Even yesterday, the Bethel Church near downtown Jacksonville, they started a SNAP pantry. And yesterday we went and the line was stretching for blocks. Hundreds of people were lined up in need of just something to eat. So that kind of tells you how great the need is in our community. I mean, 160,000 people, according to the city of Jacksonville, rely on SNAP benefits. And across 23 neighborhoods, over 1 in 2 households are on SNAP. That's according to statistics from the city of Jacksonville. So it just kind of tells you about the need. And even that $200,000 that was approved by the city council, Feeding Northeast Florida, where the money is going to, they say that that's going to only last them for about 2 weeks. It's going to feed a lot of people, but that money will be gone in 2 weeks.
Yeah, Robin Lum, this was a rare unanimous vote by the city council. There was a couple absent, but it was basically a 17-0 in favor of. And so there are some things that even in a very divided city government can bring together even very different sides.
I think they learned their lesson from back during the budget hearings when they tried to zero out funding for Meals on Wheels. That blew up in their faces. So this makes sense. That $200,000 somebody said would feed 25,000 people. Well, that's $8 per person. That's not going to go very far. But this is the kind of thing they should be doing. I'm surprised that Feeding Northeast Florida isn't a line item in the budget. I would think that it would be, but frankly, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that is the agency that is trying to pick up the slack. And Frank, this is, they provide, like all food banks in the country, basically 1 out of every 9 meals, the rest provided by SNAP in terms of, the need and their ability to fill that space. It really is not easy for them to scale up, or maybe even possible for them to scale up.
Well, Feeding Northeast Florida and all the other food banks literally put out an emergency call a couple of weeks ago, and they thought SNAP was going to go away for an undetermined amount of time. The need is great, as Anthony points out. You saw this past weekend, kids from high schools are in front of Winn-Dixie's and Publix doing food drives, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, and that's good. There's that civic responsibility at an early age. It was very great to see. What's going on in America is not just to the people who have little jobs or low-paying jobs. It's happening to high-paying parts of the economy. All the layoffs, literally hundreds of thousands in the last couple of months being, I don't know if the word is blamed, but attributed to AI, and that's only going to continue. So we're going to see more and more people finding out that their monthly money doesn't last to the end of the month, and they will need more help.
Yeah. And it is obviously a time of year where people are thinking a lot about that. There's a turkey giveaway today, in downtown Jacksonville. So anyway, that need exists and is there. I want to move on now to a topic because last night Florida um, uh, conducted another execution. This was of a man named Brian Jennings. He was convicted of the 1979 murder of a 6-year-old named Becky Kunash. And this was, on pace to be, a continued record-breaking pace, Anthony, of Florida executions.
That's right. When you look at the numbers right now, just to kind of give a perspective, since Governor DeSantis took office here in Florida, the numbers have swung dramatically. Few in 2019, none in 2020 through 2022, and the governor's saying that was because of the pandemic, and 1 in 24, and now we have a big jump in 2025. So Florida currently has about 256 people on death row. That's the second largest death row population in the country, and some people are wondering, why are we seeing an uptick in these executions? The governor says for our state, the increase stems partly from the shutdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and also a renewed focus, he says, on bringing justice to victims' families. But some people, some experts aren't so sure about that. An attorney has suggested that the shift also relates to federal policy changes and also the state's push to reduce its death row backlog. But also, one change we know, too, something that's important to mention, back in 2023, the law actually lowered the requirement for a jury to recommend the death from unanimous to an 8-4 vote.
Sure, right. No longer unanimous juries required for death in this state, but there is this big backlog, David Bauerlein, and the governor seems intent on sort of clearing out that backlog. But there have also been suggestions that some of this is politically motivated. This execution that was held of this man who killed 6-year-old Becky, Brian Jennings, that death warrant was signed almost just an hour or two after this kind of very public social media spat between our governor and the state of Kentucky, because they had released another murderer of a 6-year-old who'd come to Florida and been rearrested. And there was sort of this jostling back and forth about, well, Florida has the cocktail. If you want to borrow it, Kentucky, we can do, executions here. And almost immediately, the governor signed that death warrant for this other 6-year-old killer. There's people who say that there's sort of a measure of politics in this.
Well, I think crime always is political in terms of being tough on crime, being, the idea of carrying through these sentences that have been on the books for a while. So, yes, I would say that, I would think it would be difficult in the state of Florida to run for a statewide office and say you oppose the death penalty. So politically, it's an issue that works for somebody who's willing to say, yes, I believe in the death penalty. I believe in enforcement of it. I believe that we should carry out these death sentences. I mean, the flip side always, Ann, is that the death penalty and execution is the final verdict. I mean, you have had cases, obviously, over the years where people have been put on death row and later exonerated.
30 of them here in Florida.
Yeah, there's been, I think nationwide, 200 since 1973, 30 since that time have been in Florida. We had one case here a few years ago where
Chad Hines.
Where they freed somebody from death row who had been on death row after reviewing the evidence. So this was in 2019. I think his name was Clifford Williams. So yeah, that's the politics of it are that, on the one hand, yes, that is a winning issue, so to speak, politically, if you want to frame it that way, to be in favor of the death penalty in Florida. How do you make sure, though, that nobody is executed and then evidence comes out that that person was not the killer?
In this particular case, he was tried 3 separate times. The first 2 convictions were overturned. I think he was tried again in '86, found guilty. The death sentence was imposed. I think what people are concerned about is here we have this backlog of 258 people on death row, and we may have 18 executions this year when we've had only about 6 or 7 in the previous 5 years. Just as Governor DeSantis said, justice delayed is justice denied. So it's not like there's a bloodbath. I mean, these people were duly sentenced, and the sentences need to be carried out. And
The pace that Florida is on right now, we should say it will be by the end of the year. It's 18 is
right,
what we're on
There's
track
two more
to.
warrants to be executed.
Two more. Currently this year, both Texas and Alabama just have 5 each. So Florida's current 16 going on 18 is well ahead of most other states that carry out executions. But I want to ask you, Robin, because one of the concerns was that this man, when he was killed, when the death warrant was signed, didn't actually have a state provided lawyer at the time. And that is, a violation of sort of the rules, the way that things are done. And so, yes, justice delayed, justice denied, but this guy's been on death row for 50 years. What's the hurry? You know what I mean? Like, what is the hurry that would justify circumventing the rules and sort of the process that's in place to ensure that this is done fairly, equitably, and with all of the things, all the
if
boxes
you've had
checked?
3 trials, you've had due process. The sentence was imposed. At this point, other than this requirement, I'll call it a technical requirement, that he have some sort of legal representation at this stage in the process. Is there a real reason that the execution should have been delayed?
I mean, 3 trials doesn't necessarily suggest a perfect system, right? 3 trials suggest that things went wrong in the previous 2.
And usually what goes wrong are jury instructions, things like that. So 3 trials, 3 convictions, the imposition of the death penalty 3 separate times. In 1986, it stuck. After 40 years, I'm assuming he's exhausted all his appeals. So what do you do?
Yeah.
Carry out justice.
So
At
Frank,
no point in this process did anybody say he didn't do it. He did it. The evidence was overwhelming.
Right.
He is the worst of the worst. He's a Donald Smith. He's a Jared Harrell. People who are in our society and prey on the young and the defenseless. That's evil, and we are better off for having evil off this planet.
And Frank, this is something we should say. I mean, you don't take executions lightly. You've witnessed 4 executions in your time as a journalist, including 2 here in Florida, including Florida's last electric chair execution.
That would have been Alan Tiny Davis, who killed 3 people, a mother and her 2 children. And I'm glad you mentioned the name of Becky Kunash at the start, because we have to remember the victims, because too often they get lost in this. That woman and her 2 children who were murdered that night by Mr. Davis, Catherine and Christina Weiler and their mother Nancy, were butchered. I wasn't here then. I know police officers who were there that night, and they were crying what they saw inside that house. He was brought into the chamber in 1999, a big guy, like over 300 pounds.
Tiny, his nickname.
Tiny.
Yeah.
And they asked him if he had any last words. He said no. They put the hood over him. He starts crying, and then the execution is carried out. What made that thing the last use of Old Sparky is because he was so big and had so many medical conditions, he was on blood thinner. So when the electricity hit him, a blood vessel ruptured in his skull, and blood came pouring out from under the black hood under his white shirt. And that led to the Florida Supreme Court basically telling the legislature, change the death penalty, get rid of electrocution in favor of lethal injection, or we will strike the death penalty law down.
As
And
barbaric.
And they did it.
Well, one of the concerns, I mean, in addition to the fact that it was kind of this very bloody and sort of, visually horrific
It was.
execution.
It's hard to forget.
Yeah, but what was also the fact that his chest continued to rise and fall for some time after the power was cut, as in he appeared to still be alive.
It's called agonal breathing. There was, after the Pedro Medina execution, which that was the other botched one in which the
He
sponge
caught
on his
fire.
head caught on fire because it wasn't sufficiently salinated. They were hearings, 2 sets of hearings here in Duval County, and it was ruled that when that electricity hits your brain, that's it, instantaneous. I mean, there may be some physical manifestations of agonal breathing, but the brain is gone.
All right, we've got a call from Sally in Springfield. Good morning, Sally. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I just wanted to say I feel for the victims. I'm not diminishing their suffering, but the death penalty is barbaric. I had to actually turn the volume down when the gentleman was describing what happened, and next time, please, fair warning to the rest of us when you're talking about that. I think it's barbaric, and I think it's unbelievable that Florida is 40%, did you say, of the death penalty? I think it should be abolished. I don't believe in it, and I know that the panelist who's condoning it, has his opinions about it as far as the law is concerned, but it is barbaric. We should not be doing it.
Thanks for your thoughts, Sally. And
Americans' opinions about the death penalty are shifting gradually but steadily against it. In 1984, 80% of Americans in a Gallup poll said they were in favor of the death penalty. That same poll last year, only 53%.
I just want to throw out one more issue that has been troubling to people who are critical of policy surrounding this process, and that's sort of this lack of transparency. The example that has come up is a death warrant that was signed for Kyle Bates. Lawyers for Kyle Bates had filed a lawsuit against the state saying that they're only executing people who have white victims, and they're not executing people who have black victims. They were suggesting that there's a racial bias in the enforcement or in kind of the motive to sign a death warrant, prioritizing white lives, essentially. And so this lawsuit was filed July 29th. 2 hours later, the governor signed a death warrant for a different man who was convicted of killing 3 black victims. And once again, the people who are the kind of the Floridians for alternatives to the death penalty saying this appears to be a politically motivated death warrant signing in reaction to this lawsuit to sort of justify and to boost the numbers of people who've killed black victims by choosing someone on death row who had 3 black victims and sort of trying to create some parity there. David, I don't know if that's too in the weeds, but people are saying, look, if we just knew more about how the governor made his decision, what the process is, who he's prioritizing, what the threshold is for somebody that's been on death row for 50 years and then suddenly gets a warrant for death, that there might not be questions.
Yeah, I think those are legitimate questions to have answered. What is the process when you have this large pool of people waiting on death row? Is there some process in place for, okay, this person's been through all the appeals, this person has been it's been this amount of time since it? Is there a standard for saying, well, we feel like there was you always have to meet the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but there was some level of certainty in this particular case in terms of what was proven in court. I think those are all legitimate questions. And yeah, why this person as opposed to that person is being selected to go have the ultimate punishment administered to them.
All right. I want to take a call from Linda in Mandarin. Linda, go ahead, please.
Yes, I think earlier there was a gentleman on your panel that said the guy that got killed was the worst of the worst and preying on young children. Well, in the media today, we have a lot of people showing up that were taking advantage of young children, and a lot of people got bypassed. I'm not condoning that. But rules are there for a reason. And in this current environment where we're asking teachers to take oaths to the Constitution when our leaders don't follow the Constitution, we need rules to constrain power. So the governor is making his, in the middle of the night, he's assigning who gets executed tomorrow. But if the guy didn't have a court-appointed counsel, even though he was on there 50 years, the rules are the rules. If he's the worst of the worst, then he'll be the worst of the worst next month when he gets court-appointed attorney. We need to follow the rules because later on, if you don't, then somebody who doesn't even have counsel or is mentally deficient will say, well, he's not a good person or he's committed a crime and we've proved it once, even though it's been overturned. So let's execute him because if we do that, there's a lot of rich billionaires that should have that same standard if they are these pedophiles out here. So let's just calm it down and follow the rules. They're there for a reason. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. We also have a call from Tom on the west side. Good morning, Tom. Go ahead.
Good morning to you, too. Just wanted to say that scientific evidence has shown that cross-cultural witness identification is almost impossible. And most of these death penalty cases involve cross-cultural witness identification. So there's some serious problems, and there may be more innocent people on death row than we even realize.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate your feedback. I want to move on now to an issue that came up in City Council once again. But this was the meeting of the DOJ committee, which is created much like the other DOJ committees at the state and federal level to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. This was driven by a single council member's claims about fraud. This is coming from Councilmember Rory Diamond, basically saying, without any evidence, apparently, but making some really serious criminal accusations. Anthony, catch us up on sort of what he was saying ahead of this meeting and why he wanted an emergency DOJ meeting.
Yeah, we're talking about the city's telehealth contract, and City Councilman Rory Diamond, he claims that he's received a lot of phone calls and messages from people saying that basically the telehealth contract is being violated in such a way that there's a lot of Medicare and Medicaid fraud, with patients being unnecessarily sent to the emergency room, and that's costing the city a lot of money. However, as you just mentioned, when he's been pressed to provide examples of this, there seems to be no clear examples on exactly what is happening with this Medicare and Medicaid fraud that he's alleging. It is important to mention, and also I know City Councilman Rory Diamond has also acknowledged this, that the city confirmed that the Office of the Inspector General has reviewed the telehealth contract and found that the procurement process followed all required protocols in this situation. And even the co-founder of Telescope Health, we did an interview with him right after that meeting, and he said, once again, where are the examples? Where is the proof of this so-called fraud? He says these are erroneous accusations that distract from HealthLink Jax's mission to, quote, make care accessible to all Duval County residents. So I think the big question is, where are the examples of this alleged fraud?
Robin, I want to ask you about the process there because, Rory Diamond is saying, look, we are hearing these allegations. We just want to get to the bottom of it. We want to have an investigation. We want to look into it. At the same time, he's saying things like this is a serious misuse of taxpayer funds with potential illegal conduct. He's saying government officials may be diverting contracts to themselves. And he is also citing fraud, claims of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. Those are all kind of criminal allegations. Rory Diamond's an attorney. What do you think about kind of presenting those allegations before an investigation takes place in terms of, process or just even kind of
I think he needs to be very careful about what he says, because this is crossing over into what I would, if I were that business owner, that contract provider, I would consider that defamatory and damaging to my business model. I don't see any evidence of that. The whole idea behind that the Telelink service is to talk to people about their healthcare needs, try to get them with a physician that can talk to them over the phone, and keep people from making unnecessary trips to the emergency room. But if they wind up going to the emergency room, how is that fraud? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. If a friend of mine calls me and says that they just had a terrible fall, and I say, well, you need to go to the emergency room, am I committing Medicare or Medicaid fraud? It doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't see any proof.
Frank, this is a service that basically is meant to help people who don't have insurance.
Right.
And so the folks
So they're not
at
getting
telehealth,
Medicare or Medicaid.
well, that's what the telehealth folks have said. It's called Jack's HealthLink.
Right.
I think
HealthLink Jax.
HealthLink Jack, sorry. And so they basically said, we don't deal with Medicare and Medicaid. We're dealing with people that don't have an insurance plan.
If there's fraud, bring it forward. There was that 30-minute DOJ meeting the other day. No allegations of any specificity were brought out. Mr. Diamond has made it clear that this is not political. Well, in my experience, when somebody says it's not political, guess what? It's political. He said, well, I was part of the JA thing. All right, so what happened then? He sent out subpoenas. So he knows how to do it, send out subpoenas. And as for his claim that a company would come forward and do what Jack's HealthLinks is doing without being paid, I'd like to see that.
And by the way, Diamond also removed himself from the JEA investigation at one point when things just started heating up. That's when he removed himself from that role he was playing.
I mean,
and I was going to say, Ann, I think that the company's response has been that the allegation of Medicaid or Medicare fraud, since they don't have any Medicare, anybody who's on Medicare or Medicaid, they can't bill Medicare or Medicaid in the first place. So that's been their response there. And the other one about transporting or transferring or directing people to hospitals, the HealthLink Jax program isn't set up to do that either. It's set up for people to not go to hospitals when they don't have an emergency situation.
And Telescope says they've saved the city $11 million by not sending people to the emergency rooms unnecessarily.
Right. I think that Roy Diamond maybe doesn't dispute the savings, but David, and I don't know if you know this, but his assertion is that this service either could be free or it used to be free or it should be free, this sort of free alternative telehealth service. He says he Googled something and it does exist. Is that something that has been discussed at any depth at the city level?
Somewhat. I mean, and that's something they'll look at more. I mean, basically, he's referring to there's a program that's in place already in Jacksonville that if you call 911, the fire and rescue department has a contract with the company out of San Antonio where if they determine that it's not something that requires an emergency trip to the hospital, they'll offer the person who called the chance to get telehealth treatment of diagnosis and treatment of that. And so it's really at point of service is somebody calls 911, whether they have insurance or don't, they get the offer of getting this telehealth service. And it is free to the city because the company makes its money by then billing the health insurance company for the service. But that's a different animal from providing a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service where somebody can call a number, get the telehealth service, and that HealthLink Jacksonville is just for people who lack any insurance of any kind. They don't have Medicare, they don't have Medicaid, they don't get it through work, they don't get it through a self-insurance program. So they're two different programs and two different concepts. So, they are, in the words of Telescope Health, apples and oranges. And I think the company that also provides the service to the fire department would probably say, they're not the same program. Whether one can be melded to the other, I mean, that's something they're going to look at.
Yeah. All right. I want to move on, but if you'd like to comment on this week's news, we want to hear from you. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. So as our final topic, I want to move on to this butcher shop that was not a butcher shop that was proposed, and that request has been withdrawn. Apna Bazaar is a grocery store on Beach Boulevard. It's kind of right by 295 across from Starbucks. And Frank,
and across from an Arby's, ironically.
well, I noticed that. I was thinking, okay, so they're directly across the street from Arby's. We have the meats. They're right across from Winn-Dixie, the beef people. And yet, this was a very controversial proposal to create a sort of small-scale slaughterhouse adjacent to this grocery store that would be processing animals by kind of according to Islamic law, so that they're killed in a certain way. It's called halal preparation. So that is not going to happen. This is the second time the company has tried
They tried it up on the north side a couple of years ago, met with the same NIMBY outroar, and people on Cortez Road rose up and raised all types of issues there. Now, I went to the Planning Commission, and they deadlocked 3-3, and that lack of a recommendation was going to go to LUZ. That's Land Use and Zoning, and that would have been quite the hearing, which you can only imagine how that would turn out. I don't know. It just, everybody eats meat. A lot of people eat meat. I know. My daughter's a vegan and keeps trying to convince me not to eat meat, but people like their meat. But to put a abattoir, with credit to Monty Python, there, who thought that was a good idea? You know what NIMBY means, right? Not in my backyard. Well, in this case, it's no industrial meat butchering. Yuck.
Yeah.
You keep describing this as a small scale. It's not a butcher shop. It's a slaughterhouse. And it's not small scale. He had an application in for a 30,000 square foot addition to the existing building and a 23,000 square foot additional freestanding building.
Sure, jointly the size of a
And
football
let's
field.
talk.
So, yeah.
Well, it sounds like this was going to be industrial scale. So what do you do when you're opening a slaughterhouse like that? You're transporting in animals. You've got to adjust for the accumulation of animal feces, dispose of that. So and by the way, there are a number of European countries that have banned halal slaughtering because it's the animal's throat is cut while it's still fully conscious. It's not pre-stunned. So this is, you can get off onto whether or not halal meat processing is it's not. I would not consider it humane, but I don't think they were able to decide on that basis. It was a function of, is this a good use in this
Sure.
particular area?
I don't think that there's probably much of a good example for humane butchering in this country across the board. And when I said small scale, I really just meant compared to industrial scale. There are not that many slaughterhouses that aren't dealing with kind of a mass quantity of animals, as
But
opposed
not in mixed-use residential neighborhoods.
either of
Off
them.
Beach Boulevard.
Exactly.
Right.
Or on the Northwest Side, which is where it was originally proposed. David, the grocery store said, look, this was, our attempt to sort of service our customers. The closest place we can find these are in Orlando. But they basically said, we hear you. We're not going to put this in. Y'all are welcome at our grocery store. Do you expect this is going to resurface?
I would think it would resurface somewhere in Jacksonville. I mean, they've tried twice. I don't understand really why it's so hard to find a site that's industrial zone to do this in terms of not needing a zoning change. But I do think part of it is, they would need to find a site, I think, somewhere that is not close to a residential neighborhood. That certainly seems to be the case there. And so I would think they would try again. I mean, why not? I mean, there surely is a place somewhere in this, and that was part of the objection that the neighbors made is, look, this is a huge landmass city. Surely there's some place in this city where you can set up this establishment that doesn't have, it's not close to residential neighborhoods. So I think it would come back. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it came back.
Yeah, Anthony, it's on a lot of levels a difficult prospect. People were worried about property values, but then you also kind of, you start to hear descriptions of, the way animals are treated. You get kind of the whole animal rights advocacy ginned up. I mean, there's a lot of agents sort of coming together when you have something like this that is just on Beach Boulevard that leads to a lot of community pushback.
Right, because we're talking about chickens, lambs, goats, cows that would be brought in to this facility. And that's kind of been the big pushback because the owners, they've told us in statements and even through their lawyer, they're going to have USDA oversight. They're going to have the proper insulation that would cut down on the noise and the smell so you don't hear these animals being slaughtered and you don't smell them as well. But a lot of people in the community were saying, okay, exactly how are you going to do that when they're being shipped in? We're still... what's going to fly out of one of these, cattle trucks or whatever it may be that's coming into the neighborhood. But the owners have continued to say, this is, a part of their faith and this would be more affordable for their community. And they just want to provide the service, but they're listening to the community. So it'll be interesting to see if this does indeed come back up. I do believe that they have said they are looking at possible other locations. We're actually following up on this story. I know for sure we have a reporter on it. So it'll just kind of be interesting to see where this progresses from here.
We'll follow up with First Coast Connect. Anthony Austin, Frank Powers, David Bauerlein, Robin Lund, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here, Aaron.
All right, up next, a public media tradition honors Mr. Rogers while providing for people in our neighborhood.
Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, finding the who, what, when, where, why, and how that led to the accident is critical to proving the truth.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
For more than 40 years, he's brought to life the stories of America. Now, Ken Burns turns his lens to the struggle that created America.
Ken Burns presents The American Revolution, beginning Sunday night at 8 on Jax PBS and the PBS app.
WJCT Public Media invites you to a special screening of Gilda as we celebrate Noir-vember, Wednesday, November 19th. Come out of the shadows and enjoy our cash bar, popcorn, and Gilda.
What did you say to him?
I just told him if a man answers, hang up.
Doors open at 6:30, film screens at 7. Visit WJCT.org/film for tickets.
The longest government shutdown in history is over. On the next Friday News Roundup, we take stock of the aftermath and the provisions that made it into the final bill. Plus, newly released Epstein emails put the White House on defense, and we say goodbye to the penny. The Friday News Roundup, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, every year, WJCT honors the legacy of a man who epitomized warmth and generosity. Fred Rogers, whose beloved PBS show helped shape kinder kids for more than 3 decades, created the annual Mr. Rogers Sweater Drive to create and encourage the spirit of caring. Here to tell us about the 23rd annual drive, hosted by WJCT Public Media, is Darren Cook, Vice President of Consumer Sales for the Sudduth Company. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Paul Stassi, CEO and Executive Director of the City Rescue Mission. Paul, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having us here today.
And we're also joined by Kamal Gasper, our friend at ViStar Credit Union, where he works as the Vice President of Community Engagement. Welcome back, Kamal.
Yes, it's always great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. So, Paul, this has been a reminder this last week of, the need, right? This has been a really cold week. The need for winter clothing, especially for those who are less fortunate. So what does this event mean, annually for you at City Rescue Mission?
Yeah, well, at City Rescue Mission, we help those who are most in need here in Jacksonville. And often they come to us maybe just with a single pair of clothes on their back and no coats or anything. So as we go into this time of year, it's really critical to be able to give coats, hats, gloves, and things like that. And like you said, this week was a perfect example where it went very cold very quickly. So
yeah. And so this drive includes items, some of which you mentioned. It's my understanding that, adult needs are real, but the need for children gear is just as important.
It is, yes.
So
yes.
what can people donate in the realm of like what kids are looking for, what kids need?
Well, I think it's the same thing. It's the coats, the jackets, the hats, the gloves.
Blankets, all of this
Right,
sort
blankets,
of gently used. And then you also accept if they're new, things like
Oh,
socks
sure.
and underwear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kamal, what is it about this event that draws in your organization each year? I mean, why the sweater drive in particular?
Yeah, it's just the compassion and empathy of Mr. Rogers, and it's a way for our members and those in the community to be able to donate. So every ViStar location has 3 drop-off boxes, so for men, for women, and children. And so it's a great way for our members when they're doing business at ViStar or those in the community that just want to donate. But it also aligns with our purpose to do good. Our core values are to lead by example, and we're a credit union, but we make sure that we give back to the community. So it's a great place for anyone to live, work, and play. For those that you think for the individuals, you may think of them as being homeless, but there are individuals that are unsheltered, that are unhoused, and those that are living paycheck to paycheck, need these warm weather items as cold weather season approaches.
No, Kamal, you're probably too young for the Mr. Rogers generation.
I remember Mr. Rogers.
Do you? Okay.
I do.
I learned when I was preparing for this that the sweaters that he wore on his show were actually knitted by his mom.
They were,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, that's kind of an extraordinary thing. But we certainly do, Darren, associate sweaters, warmth, giving with Mr. Rogers and just kind of the legacy that he left behind of caring for neighbors. Why is Sudduth involved in this effort? What does it bring to the company?
Yeah, well, we have a responsibility to give back to our community. The people that make up our company also are people that make up, different parts of the community. So we have a responsibility to, treat everybody with dignity and respect that need it. And it's basic things. So we take a lot of pride in being able to do this, not just in Jacksonville, but in other markets that we serve across the country, just as a way to help build and strengthen the bond between businesses and the members that we serve.
And so Sudeth locations, there's two that people can actually drop their gear off at. Kamal mentioned that it's most five-star credit union branches. They're also, I believe, at the Tom Bush family of dealerships, kind of and here at WJCT Public Media headquarters, of course. Paul, what kind of response have you seen? We know that donations began on November 1st. It goes through the 30th.
Mhm.
What kind of response are we seeing so far?
Yeah, so really the donations go to the other locations now.
So you won't see them
we
until
won't
they.
see them. But I think on the distribution day, that's when the big trucks roll in and everybody unloads, and we're able to just distribute everything that was given. So
And in past years, you've seen a pretty good haul.
it has been it's been a real blessing, and that we're just so happy that we could be part of this. So thank you both.
Yeah, well, it's a great annual event. All donations go to the Clara White Mission and to City Rescue Mission in early December. And if you have questions, we've got a link on our website. It also links to your guys' website. So thank you so much for coming on today. Thanks for doing this
you.
drive every year.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have questions or comments, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight here on WJCT. You can also find our entire archive at the First Coast Connect YouTube channel and at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Feel better, Bella. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Don't forget to listen Saturday at 4 when neurologist Dr. Joe Servin speaks to the former NIH director about why public health should be apolitical. Join us Monday when we ask members of a new task force what solutions they'd like to see to lower the cost of childcare in the city. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Congaree and Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
This is WJCT News.